Hi, everybody. I'm going to get this demo of the IT Harvest Analyst dashboard started. Thank you all for joining. And we have been working on the data behind what you're going to see for 17 years, but the tool itself has only been in existence for just over 18 months, and it's gone through many revisions. If we were to keep track of versions, what you're going to see tonight is probably version 6. The idea behind it was really inspired by my time at Gartner way back. And I became frustrated at the lack of actual data that we had on companies. Now, for the companies that I covered in the Magic Quadrants, I eventually had lots of data because, you send out a spreadsheet questionnaire and they fill it out, their sales in each region, and you get lots of data that way. That's great. But there was no active ongoing research into other companies other than the ones in the Magic Quadrants. And that started to become a problem. By the time I left Gartner, there were 1,100 cybersecurity vendors. By the time I launched IT Harvest in 2006, I counted 1,600 vendors. When we published the first version of Security Yearbook, there were 2,200 vendors that we tracked. And now we are tracking 3,644. That was a count yesterday. Obviously, since it's a full-time job for several people, just to keep track of this, you need some place to put all that data. So that's why we built the Analyst dashboard. So I'm going to just jump right in, give you a feel for what it looks like. The primary use case that we built this for were people that research the cybersecurity industry. And who is that? Well, it's industry analysts, obviously, such as myself. And analysts have just a desire for all the numbers. And it turns out that the other use cases are other people that just want the data. And that includes people that are selling to cybersecurity companies. Obviously, venture capitalists and private equity and strategic buyers at large companies are using this data today to find those targets of either investment or acquisition. And then, interestingly, the vendors themselves, who have products that they sell to other cybersecurity vendors, OEM relationships, are a significant percentage of the number of users we have for the dashboard. This is the Explore page, and this is where all the fun starts. We've got general filters, which include the country and city, and then categories. And we hear over and over from people that we show this to and people who eventually sign up to use it, that it's our categorization that is the primary differentiator in value add from things like PitchBook or Crunchbase or TrackXN, all these tools that have captured millions of companies. And then, if you've got 4.5, 5 million companies in your database, a 3,600 vendor category is going to be a tiny niche, right? It's just small. So they're going to be, the people who do PitchBook are going to be totally happy saying, okay, cybersecurity, boom, that's a category. Well, we've broken cybersecurity down into 17 categories. And obviously, if you're an investor and you're interested in post-quantum security, you can't go through 25,000 vendors that PitchBook has and try and find them. You have to do what we did. We went and looked at all those from multiple sources, and we still do that constantly, and filter out the ones that aren't even vendors, because there are so many consultants and resellers and distributors, cyber insurance companies that don't qualify as vendors. That once you've done that, then you can start applying these categories to them and put them in the right buckets. Big ones like GRC and identity, smaller ones like security operations and analytics and testing. But you can quickly search on all of those. So, I spent a lot of time looking at threat intelligence vendors. So if you do a quick search on those, it'll basically pull out all the threat intelligence vendors, tell you how many results. You can look at a quick search summary so you can see what countries they're in. This is pretty typical distribution, though. Yeah, usually Israel's number 2, but the United States has 61 threat intelligence vendors in it. And then, of course, that's half of all the vendors. That's pretty typical proportion for the U.S. You can quickly sort the results that are showing here with the logos. You could say, well, let's sort on growth so far this year. So that'd be this column. Some, relatively small, but super high growth numbers, right? So Filigran is growing, has tripled in size. So they had 10, grew 200%. Now they're 30. So that's a way to quickly find the ones that are interesting to you. But what I usually end up doing, especially if there's 122, is I export them to a spreadsheet, and I'll choose, well, in that spreadsheet, these are the fields I want, the categories, subcategories, the country for sure. I could choose the investors. That's a long list, usually of dozens of investors. But I'm definitely interested in total funding and maybe funding so far this year. I want to know the growth. I usually look at 2023 growth. I can look at the last quarter growth as well. And then simply export it to a CSV file, then pull that in and do a sorting and analysis there. Usually you want to sum up how much funding the group has gotten. We've got estimates for revenue that might be interesting to actually calculate market size, which is one of the use cases for this tool is developing a model for your TAM. So if you're going to your investors and arguing that there's a big opportunity here in a particular space, you can make your own estimates of total revenue of the space as it exists today, let alone where it's going from there. So that was the category search, but there's a lot of smaller categories. So if I look at threat intelligence, there's, dark web is a category. So you just say, okay, I only want to look at the dark web vendors in that subcategory. And that'll be, only 22 specialize in going, looking at the dark web. So yet another way to filter was on that subcategory. We go all the way down to groups, which are very specific, API visibility as a group. And then tags, because nobody can keep up with the number of acronyms that Gartner makes up every week. So we just grab those acronyms and tag the vendors with them. So if you are wondering about the ones they're writing about, you can quickly just look up external attack surface management and select that tag and do a search. And then you probably want to refine, and this comes in handy when you're saying, well, I only want startups, and I may be or I may be looking at Series A or Series B. So you make some estimates about how big those companies are and do limits on headcount, for instance. So you say, I was just doing a search for somebody today. He's looking for a job for his son. And I said, well, his son has sales experience at a relatively small company with 30 people, but, there's interesting companies that have sales positions up to, 100 people. So quickly apply that after I take the other, here we go. Reset my filters. And now I'm going to apply that 30 to 500. 30 to 500. And that have grown at least 20% so far this year. So apply that search, see what we get. Should be 200, 394. So 394 companies are in that size range and have grown 20% so far this year. If you're looking for a job, obviously looking at ones that are still growing and not laying people off, as quite a few are, but about half are growing, then this would be a great filter to apply. But you say, well, also on top of that, I'm going to a conference. We've got one subscriber who's going to Black Hat Europe, and they want to know all the vendors. So you might say, note that Black Hat Europe coming up, reapply that search. And you can see we went from 394 fast growing companies, 24 of them are exhibiting at Black Hat Europe. So I'll put that spreadsheet, make some notes, and make sure to visit them when I go to Black Hat Europe. So you can also filter on funding and revenue, as well as founding year. We've got some preset filters for things like the $10 million club. Those have received more than 10 million in funding, VC backed versus bootstrapped. And then a very special one, which we actually created for a subscriber in Australia. And that is, I'm looking for vendors that have some employees, a presence here in Australia. And of course, we do this for all these countries. And this use case was for a headhunter that wanted to find people to place at vendors who had a foothold in Australia. So pretty cool feature to do that. So, but what if you're not looking for vendors, you're looking for products? So we're in the early stages of creating a product selection tool. Today, I've talked about use cases that are very specific, probably won't appeal to an actual buyer of security products. In the not too distant future, we will have all the products. Today, we've got at least one product per vendor, but we don't have all the products. So if you're searching, for instance, I might not have a complete category for quantum computing and quantum computing security, but you could just do a search on quantum and you'll find all the products. So it could be, if there were multiple products in our database for a single vendor, then there would definitely be more products than there were vendors. In this case, it's a pretty close comparison. And, so you look at Cocoon Data's quantum resistant encryption platform, you can compare it to other solutions over here, and you get a complete description of all the features of its product. So we have about 3,200 products, and we are just starting to embark on a new effort to actually grab all the products. So let's go to Fortinet as a company. We haven't shown you what the data looks like yet. So we're done filters. Let's look at what the data looks like. So for every single company, we've written a description of what they do. You can see the categorizations that we've applied for that company. And we track their locations if we can find them, and their partners. These are basically usually, resellers and other types of partners that they have. And then we track news. So I pull from our news feed of, product launches, or if they've been in the news, we've got all that information. And I always go to the growth page every time I look at a company, because it just tells a story. What stories is Fortinet telling with its growth numbers? It's a healthy, growing company. Basically, it's, obviously it grew faster at one point, but it's pretty straight line right now. This looks really, really good. On top of that, we have predictions of future growth based on its job postings. So with just make some assumptions about how many of the open positions will be filled in the next 3 months. We also track funding rounds. Of course, it's been a long time. Certainly Fortinet hadn't taken any funding for a long time. We're talking, what are these two? Yeah, 2003 and 2004, and seed funding in 2002. Crazy times. And you can also look at the investors who were the original VCs that put money into Fortinet, Redpoint. And when I worked there, I had to interview with the partner from Redpoint. he fell asleep during the interview. So that just shows you what an exciting person I am. But let's look at products because this is new. So Fortinet is a great example because Fortinet has a lot of products. Fortinet has one of everything practically. And we, generalize that Fortinet is a hardware security appliance vendor, which it certainly is. That's where the majority of its revenue comes from. But it also has many, many other products. So FortiSIM is Fortinet's SIM product. And FortiEDR is Fortinet's endpoint detection and response product. FortiOS, is their overlying security posture system. I don't even know what FortiOS is. FortiManager to manage all those things, to manage all the gateways. FortiXDR. Well, if you got EDR, got to have XDR. FortiMail, FortiSOAR. I know you didn't know any of this. Okay, so you can see the task at hand is, how do you capture all those products? And right now we're doing it kind of manually as we visit each vendor's website, go to each of their product page, and ingest the text from their product page, and then generate these descriptions. We're going to figure out how to automate that because, as we've discovered over the years, as a matter of fact, when we first launched, there were things in the database that we didn't account for, like how do you add a new column for a new year? Because we just, you're making your MVP of a product. You don't think ahead to, hey, next year we're going to need to have another column for the year. Things like that. And certainly this a case of that. We had to re-architect a lot of the database in order to accommodate all the different products. And if, there could be 30,000 products. And this addresses a contention I have that most people use Gartner Magic Quadrants. They use Gartner for product selection, right? They need to know what the best product for them is. And now Gartner's customers, of course, are large enterprise for the most part, and including government agencies. And they buy from big companies. So it's okay to have the only product selection tool available to you is Magic Quadrant because it's got the top 12 or 20 vendors that other Gartner customers use. So you're kind of okay if you use any of them. And the rest is just, creating a short list so you can issue RFPs and get demos from all of them. I believe that's doing a disservice to both the buyer and the seller because there are plenty of great products out there that don't show up on a Magic Quadrant. Magic Quadrants are, usually for well-established categories. They're not going to be for so-called emerging technology. And that's, these days, we need a lot more emerging technology data. And because we've collected all the vendors and now all the products, you'll be able to quickly say, hey, I need to protect my SaaS solution. Or we have too many SaaS products and I want to control the identity and how people use them. Or we're using artificial intelligence in our enterprise. Which security solutions should we look at to help protect that data? So, okay, I want to, let's see if I've one more thing I want to demo because it's fairly new. And if you've seen a demo before, you probably didn't see lists. So this is an evolution of watch lists. So now you can create multiple lists. You can automatically add things to that list. I created this 2023 hero list. This was all companies that were growing a certain amount. So I just created it and added them all, 140 vendors. And so you can page through those. And these are the cybersecurity heroes. But I also created a failing companies list. And of course, this is going to be, of interest to an analyst. I don't know, be interest to anybody else. But these are companies that are dropping in headcount so far this year dramatically, 20, 30%. And it gives me something to, look into, right? If you look at Tripwire, it's, Tripwire's acquired, and what happens because our data comes from LinkedIn is after the acquisition, everybody changes their employer affiliation to the company that acquired them. Look at Watch Mandiant, for instance. Mandiant employment dropped in half when Google acquired them. And that was just people going, well, I'd rather have Google on my resume than Mandiant. And that's, so you just continue to watch those. Automox was an interesting one that grabbed my attention in the summer last year when I saw they went from 438 people, down to, by August, 310 people. So, called up the chairman of the board, who happened, was one of the early investors, and he jumped on the phone and explained, we're just hiring too quickly, and the CEO just couldn't get out of that, so we let him go, and the new CEO came in and laid off over 100 people. But you can see they've been pretty steady, if somewhat down since then. So one last feature to show you, one that I really love because I check in on it every single day, and that is our news feed. So we partner with Feedly, who captures news basically from millions of sites, 3.5 million different sites, including Reddit and Y Combinator, Hacker News, and sucks in all that data, but then applies AIs that they've trained on our data, the vendors' names basically, and then feed us that fire hose of news on all the vendors. And that's where we take that news and put it on the vendor profile page, but we also put it into buckets for press releases, M&A activity. So Palo Alto acquiring Talon Cyber is still the big news, but Proofpoint acquired Tessian. That's last week. And then funding data. So this is news up to the 7th, and so there must not have been any funding news yesterday, but there is some today. So when this gets updated, we'll see that. So Risk Ledger, Mirror Security, we'll all see this. And then there are other categories that are interesting. Looking at product news. So eventually, when we do have all the products, we're going to have to analyze the product news to make sure we update product descriptions when they're new versions. If there's 30,000 products, most of them are going to have some sort of change every year, and we'll have to capture that all the time. Partnership announcement, new regulations, lawsuits, leadership changes can be very interesting. Patents you would think would be interesting, but quite often there aren't very many patent announcements, even though there are plenty of patents being written by these vendors. They don't make press out of them. So that was our demo, and I'm so happy you come and join us. Happy to take questions if you have any.